Blazing Saddles has been analyzed, discussed and paraphrased endlessly for decades. Fans have continuously overlooked one detail though. It's not some backstage conflict, a deleted scene or a covert cameo. It's presented so subtly, right there on film, hiding in plain sight, that even ardent admirers missed it. Are you insane? It's pointless. Yes, exactly. And I got into a heated argument, which lasted for almost 20 minutes, until at last Gene Wilder verified it. And it alters your perspective of the entire movie after you've seen it. What if the quietest performance in the room was the sole reason the most outlandish comedy of its day was successful? 1 second is frequently disregarded. It wasn't in the script, but it was what kept the movie together. The part he was never supposed to play. Gig Young, an accomplished Hollywood actor and Oscar winner, was already playing the part of the Waco Kid when Mel Brooks started shooting Blazing Saddles. Young appeared to be the ideal choice on paper, a respectable actor who could give the elderly gunslinger part legitimacy. Behind the scenes though, everything quickly fell apart, started to show obvious symptoms of distress on the first day of filming. He was trembling, slurring his words, and perspiring. At first those on set thought he was method acting, but the reality was much more serious. Young had fainted in the middle of the morning due to severe alcohol withdrawal. Production has to be stopped. There was an issue at the studio, and Brooks urgently needed a substitute. Rather than negotiating with agents or having auditions, Brooks personally called Gene Wilder, whom he fully trusted. Brooks was aware of Wilder's ability to perform well under duress because the two had previously collaborated on The Producers. The interesting thing is that Wilder didn't require much information to say yes. Brooks claims that Wilder didn't request the role description, the script, or even the compensation. He just nodded and took off the following day. It was not a strategic professional move. It was a favor between partners, and might have been a rescue attempt for a movie that was in danger. Less than 24 hours later, still jet-lagged, Gene Wilder was on set, prepared to take over a character he had never practiced. The speed with which Wilder assumed control of the persona has an almost legendary quality. Wilder just had hours to prepare, whereas most actors spend weeks or months doing so. However, by the time the cameras started rolling, he was already inhabiting the Waco Kid as if he had been living in the character's shoes for years. It was more than simply his skill that made his performance so powerful. It was his readiness to be completely present in the midst of the mayhem. His appearance changed the tone of the entire character, and prevented the movie from collapsing too soon. If Young had stayed, would the Waco Kid have been as subtly tragic or as dryly philosophical? Wilder's interpretation became instantly famous, but we'll never know. It does, however, pose an intriguing query. Even if the casting didn't initially indicate it, was Wilder always meant for the part? Brooks was certain of one thing, but he never presented it as fate. There was no turning back once Wilder took on the role. One of the most acclaimed comedic performances in history started as an emergency recast. The Waco Kid was more than a contingency. It became a standard for understated humor. And in the midst of a manufacturing catastrophe, it all began with a phone call. No one on set anticipated what Wilder did with the role once he stepped in to save it, and everything was altered. Gene's understated performance was brilliant. It was no coincidence that Gene Wilder chose to portray the Waco Kid in a positive light. He made the conscious decision before he ever set foot on the set. Mel Brooks claims that Wilder consented to participate in the production with one specific requirement. He had no intention of portraying the role for amusement. In a movie full of absurdism, humor and turmoil where people were breaking the fourth wall, Wilder insisted on giving a quiet, even melancholy performance. This actor wasn't attempting to steal scenes for comedy. That person was aware of the potency of contrast. Wilder didn't overact or force his facial expressions. Instead, he leaned into silence, lending the Waco Kid a sense of subdued seriousness that fueled the craziness around him. This strategy was more than just a creative choice. The entire movie was grounded by this well-thought-out maneuver. Later, Mel Brooks attributed Blazing Saddles' core to Wilder's nuance. The Waco Kid stood out as an Old West ghost, burned out, introspective, and oddly dignified, while figures like Hedley Lamarr and Mongo pushed ridiculousness to the limit. Irony wasn't the only reason behind the now famous jailhouse scene in which the kid explains his unsteady hands and lack of nerves. With a fatigue that verged on tragedy, Wilder gave it. It gave the line a humorous yet relatable quality. The satire in the movie might have turned into farce if it weren't for Wilder's inner strategy. It's interesting to note that Wilder's concern on being truthful might have also been a reflection of his own uneasiness with excess. His co-workers frequently characterized him as deliberate, meticulous, and fervently committed to emotional sincerity. As an observer who didn't have to yell to be heard, the Waco Kid therefore evolved into a continuation of Wilder's own philosophy. His tone was controlled and his timing was accurate, even while he was saying ridiculous lines. It should come as no surprise that audiences frequently quote his lines since they are the most unexpected rather than the loudest. Wilder's acting was the pause that made the punchlines in a film that was primarily made up of them land more forcefully. Was Gene Wilder's strategy risky, then? Possibly. Such discipline could have made the role disappear in the hands of a less talented actor. However, Wilder recognized a crucial aspect of comedy. Absurdity is enhanced by contrast. His refusal to play the clown added humor to the craziness of others. His motionlessness turned into the storm's eye. Decades later, that decision, calm, self-assured and in control, became the performance that still defines the movie. The dream team that never happened. Richard Pryor was extensively associated with Blazing Saddles before movie came out, both as a writer and as the actor who was initially supposed to play Sheriff Bart. Mel Brooks had supported Pryor for the part because of his unadulterated comic ability and cultural significance. The film's voice, particularly its unvarnished commentary on racism and power in America, was greatly influenced by his participation as a co-writer. However, Pryor's opportunities to star on screen were unexpectedly cut short, even while his talents behind the scenes remained intact. In the end, Warner Brothers management prevented him from being cast because they were concerned about his public scandals and drug usage. Their choice changed a potentially pivotal moment in comedy history and changed the chemistry of the movie. Later, Gene Wilder admitted to this missed chance, frequently considering what the movie may have been if Pryor had been with him. Later movies like Stir Crazy and Silver Streak, where their comic timing and contrast produced some of the most memorable cinematic duos, demonstrated the two's chemistry. Pryor's portrayal of Bart in Blazing Saddles would have initiated that collaboration years earlier. Although he acknowledged how their connection might have changed the tone of the movie, Wilder never voiced any anger. Would Pryor's ferocious wit have contrasted with the Waco Kid's subdued melancholy? Even after several decades, the question still remains. The film still bears Pryor's fingerprints despite the shift in the cast. The wit of the sarcasm and the cadence of the jokes are ingrained in his voice. Although Cleavon Little had a strong performance as Bart, Wilder acknowledged that Pryor's creative contributions were what gave the movie its bite. The underlying sharpness in many of the lines was pure. Even though he didn't appear on screen, Pryor helped to develop the film's emotional honesty and refusal to tone down its racial message. A performer rarely has such a profound impact on a movie without really being in it. However, Pryor was able to accomplish just that. In the end, Blazing Saddles continues to be a significant moment in comedy history. However, it's difficult to avoid picturing the alternate version, in which Wilder and Pryor first teamed up amidst the ridiculous commotion in dirty streets. It may seem like a lost chance that this pairing didn't occur sooner, but it might have also increased the influence of their subsequent partnerships. The idea of both icons being together on screen in this groundbreaking satire is still one of Hollywood's greatest what-ifs for admirers of both figures. Moments of breakdown and off-screen mentoring. Even while Fire Saddles seemed ridiculous, the mood behind the scenes was sometimes anything but humorous. A high-stress atmosphere was produced by the demands of pushing artistic boundaries, handling studio resistance, and negotiating erratic on-set relationships. During production, Gene Wilder was generally regarded as a quiet, stabilizing figure. Wilder's cool-headedness helped keep the actors and crew grounded during stressful situations, even though Mel Brooks led with frantic intensity and unrelenting vision. Film crew members remembered that Wilder hardly ever spoke loudly or brought attention to himself, but in the midst of the chaos of improvisation, long hours and studio anxiety, his presence was comforting, a sort of emotional mooring. Wilder's impact went beyond his stage presence. He was known to offer guidance and assist less seasoned or younger actors in honing their delivery in between takes. Not with a big lecture, but with gentle direction and minor changes to tone, pace, or emphasis. He had learned the importance of rhythm and restraint from his years of stage work and his time working with Brooks on The Producers. His mentorship wasn't initially apparent to others, but it became evident in retrospect. Despite not demanding attention, he had a significant impact on a number of peripheral scenes. He was even referred to by some crew members as the unofficial director of tone, making sure that the ratio of earnestness to satire didn't slant too much in one side. The creation of Young Frankenstein was one of Wilder's lesser-known contributions to the Blazing Saddles movie, even though it wasn't featured in the final result. Wilder started discussing a fresh concept he had been considering with Brooks during downtime on the shoot. What if Dr. Frankenstein's descendant had no interest in carrying on his family's tradition? Can you hear me? Deliver my creation, originally discussed during pauses in production, that notion would grow into one of the most recognizable horror comedies ever produced. Few actors are capable of the kind of creative multitasking that Wilder does, as seen by his ability to transition between outrageous comedy and a completely other concept in one scene. It also demonstrated the degree of confidence and cooperation that existed between Brooks and Wilder, a partnership that resulted in more than just amusement. Therefore, even though Gene Wilder's wit and stillness are what viewers remember most about his performance in Blazing Saddles, his off-screen persona might have been just as significant. He encouraged his colleagues, steadied the production during erratic times, and subtly influenced the direction of comedic filmmaking. In an otherwise chaotic film, Wilder's backstage presence was anything but. It is reasonable to question whether the movie would have survived at all if he hadn't been the calm in the middle of the storm. The tragic undertones of the laughter Gene Wilder's depiction of the Waco Kid in Blazing Saddles is frequently recalled for its deadpan delivery and flawless comedic timing, but it also carried a startling amount of emotional weight behind the surface. The Waco Kid is shown as a profoundly broken man who is disillusioned with the world and troubled by his history, far from being merely a drunken gunslinger cliché. Despite his reputation as a sensitive actor, Wilder took the job surprisingly seriously. In addition to being funny, his character's apprehensive hand tremors and aloof manner were subtly suggestive of suffering, possibly even post-traumatic stress disorder, which Wilder portrayed as authentic rather than exaggerated. The Waco Kid was distinguished from the more general personalities around him by this more in-depth approach. In a movie where a lot of performances tended toward ludicrous satire, Wilder's portrayal implied that the child's withdrawal was based on true desperation. In light of this, viewers who rewatch the movie frequently notice how Wilder downplays parts that others could have performed for laughs. At a pivotal point, when the child remembers being the fastest draw in the West, his tone is one of remorse rather than boast. It seems more like a confession than nostalgia. These subtleties subtly alter the character's memory, even though they are not immediately apparent on first viewing. The way that Wilder conveyed the Waco Kid's suffering through silence and stillness is especially noteworthy. Comedy usually rewards energy and speed, but Wilder's restraint was what gave him power. If you're only looking for jokes, it's easy to miss the depth he created with his pauses, hesitations, and silent responses. Later, Mel Brooks admitted that the Gene gave the role an emotional intelligence that wasn't necessarily part of the script. A comedic actor wasn't attempting to be dramatic in this instance. It was an instance where an actor realized that the most humorous characters are frequently the ones who suffer the most. That pain was always there just behind the smirk, but it was never the main focus of the Waco Kid. In retrospect, Wilder's portrayal gives a human element to a movie that frequently thrives on irreverence. His Waco Kid makes us ponder what was previously happening in addition to making us laugh. The narrative started. He gave up on the world, but why? What did he lose that caused him to turn to alcohol and resentment? Although the movie doesn't openly address these issues, Wilder's portrayal makes it impossible to overlook them. It serves as a reminder that genuine emotion has a place in parody as well, and in Blazing Saddles, it subtly enters on a quivering palm and a tired eye. However, just as Wilder's subdued melancholy offered the Waco Kid unexpected nuance, the backstage events exposed a whole other difficulty: maintaining a straight face. Scenes you didn't witness. Despite Gene Wilder's composed performance in Blazing Saddles, the cast and crew couldn't stop laughing, thus many of his most iconic scenes almost didn't make it into the finished version. Clean takes were challenging because of Wilder's nuanced delivery and well-timed lines, which frequently took audiences by surprise. Some of the funniest scenes in the movie were repeated multiple times because someone off-camera would burst out laughing, according to various crew members. In multiple instances, Mel Brooks had to be momentarily removed off the set due to his laughter leaking into the audio recording. Getting Wilder to deliver wasn't the problem. It was making the others keep their composure while he did. Scenes where Wilder's dry comments would land so suddenly that camera operators and sound technicians couldn't control their reactions were a recurrent problem during filming. These were not general jokes meant to elicit laughter. These lines, which contrasted with the chaos surrounding him, were modest and unconventional yet effective. For instance, the straightforward manner in which he said, "Remember, these are just ordinary farmers. These folks are native to the area. The New West's common clay." More takes were trashed than nearly any other scenario because of idiots. The individuals behind the camera went crazy. Even Cleavon Little reportedly struggled to remain in character throughout those takes. Several of Wilder's more in-depth character scenes, especially those that examined the Waco Kid's emotional state, were ultimately omitted from the finished movie. Longer sequences that went deeper into the children's pasts are described. These scenes allegedly provided more time for reflection than the film's brisk pacing allowed. Crew members have noted that some of Wilder's most dramatic work was left on the cutting room floor, even though these scenes haven't been fully confirmed or released. It poses an intriguing query. Would the movie have slowed down at those more subdued scenes? Or would they have given a character who already had a lot of hidden complexity even more depth? In any case, one may comprehend Wilder's influence from what is left of Blazing Saddles. Fans and movie historians, however, are still fascinated by those missing elements. If the team had been able to maintain a straight face, what might we have witnessed? What if in between the commotion, the studio had permitted a few more silent minutes of contemplation? These behind-the-scenes tales show more than just how challenging it was to film around Gene Wilder's brilliance. They also demonstrate the multifaceted nature of his act. The scenes you couldn't hear because the team was laughing too much may have been some of the most illuminating, even in a noisy movie. Wilder's subdued rejection of Hollywood stereotypes. The way that Gene Wilder approached comedy in Blazing Saddles was very different from what Hollywood was expecting at the time. Wilder selected subtlety over the over-the-top delivery, exaggerated facial expressions, and physical antics that many comedic actors use to get laughs. He steered clear of the usual humorous cliches in his portrayal of the Waco Kid. There was no desperate attempt to garner a laugh, no posturing for the camera, and no winks at the punchline. Rather, Wilder allowed his scenes to be carried by timing, illness, and quiet. This was especially clear when he introduced his detention cell, one of the most unforgettable scenes in the movie. He uttered lines with little effort but maximum impact while slouched in a bunk, half D******, and hardly paying attention. The significance of the occasion was whispered rather than shouted, which is what made it memorable. Not only did this performance defy comedy conventions, but it also disregarded the visual language upon which studio comedies had been constructed for many years. In a movie where everyone else was going big and pushing limits, Wilder took a back seat. This choice wasn't made by mistake. It was dangerous and deliberate. Extroversion was rewarded in comedy, particularly throughout the 1970s. However, Wilder's delivery of lines like "Are we awake?" demonstrated that restraint might be just as effective. Are we conscious? We don't know. His humor was delivered with unwavering composure and caustic sarcasm, not because he was humorous but because he was genuine. The Waco Kid appeared to have witnessed considerably more than the narrative alone indicated, as a result of that grounded realism. This tacit disobedience permeated Wilder's larger professional ethos. He didn't want to overpower other actors or control a scene. He played off them instead, reacting rather than performing, listening more than talking. It's an approach that honored both the content and the listener. In Blazing Saddles, this mindset allowed the ludicrous parts to shine without overwhelming the emotional undercurrent his character contributed. He displayed a rare confidence by choosing to support the film's tone rather than compete for laughs. He had faith in the narrative, the timing, and the audience's intelligence. Instead than making the comedy louder, this made it sharper. In the end, one of the things that makes Wilder's performance so timeless is his defiance of comedy cliches. He offered unexpected depth by underplaying a role in an exaggerated movie, creating a sort of humorous counterpoint. In a loud movie, his calm delivery was not a flaw. The turmoil was held together by the glue. By doing this, Wilder not only questioned but also changed what viewers anticipated from a comedy protagonist. On set, a career change was born. One of Gene Wilder's most well-known creations, Young Frankenstein, had its roots in the Blazing Saddles set. While filming, Wilder surreptitiously discussed a new concept with Mel Brooks, amid the controlled pandemonium that surrounded the production. Gene was completely okay. One night, when it was around 5:30 or 6 o'clock, I told him, "I want you to do the wacky scene." It wasn't a formal proposal or a big pitch. Between takes, there was a brief exchange of words. What if Dr. Frankenstein's grandson was desperate to break with the family tradition? Wilder said out loud. This random idea would ultimately serve as the basis for the movie Young Frankenstein, which would revolutionize the genre of horror comedy. It is noteworthy that this classic idea originated during the downtime of another film that was already pushing the boundaries of comedy, rather than in a writer's room or studio conference. Mel Brooks was first unconvinced. Both men said that Brooks dismissed the notion at first. His attention was on Blazing Saddles, a production that was already fraught with logistical and artistic difficulties. However, Wilder persevered with passion rather than coercion. He created a draft since he was confident enough in the concept to complete the assignment without assurance. Brooks soon changed his mind after reading it. Unquestionably, Wilder's work combined humor, tribute, and character-driven drama. What had begun as a light-hearted idea quickly evolved into a serious artistic endeavor. Young Frankenstein might not have been a reality without Blazing Saddles' cooperation and downtime. This change was a significant turning point in Wilder's career. Young Frankenstein solidified him as a creative force behind the camera, even though he had previously established himself as a skilled humorous performer. In addition to being the movie's star, he co-wrote it and contributed to its tone, tempo, and emotional center. His career entered a new chapter with that degree of participation, one in which he helped define it from the beginning rather than merely interpreting someone else's vision. The same instincts that had made his portrayal in Blazing Saddles so unique were evident in his work on Young Frankenstein. A focus on emotional truth, moderation, and balance, even in the face of absurdity. It's safe to assume that Young Frankenstein would not exist in the current shape, if at all, without Blazing Saddles. In addition to producing comedic innovations, Brooks and Wilder's creative atmosphere on that Western parody served as a breeding ground for fresh concepts. There was little fuss surrounding Wilder's transition from performer to creator. It resulted from time and calm resolve. Looking back, Blazing Saddles was more than just a classic comedy. It served as a springboard for one of the best parodies of a genre ever created, Studio System vs. Wilder. In Blazing Saddles, Gene Wilder's contribution went much beyond his on-screen persona. Additionally, he supported Mel Brooks amid the film's most acrimonious conflicts with the company. The movie's racial satire, obscenity, and frontal challenges to American social conventions made Warner Brothers executives uncomfortable right away. Several studio letters demanded that the script be revised, that the language be softer, and that certain parts that dealt too directly with racism be cut out. Although Wilder was neither a producer nor a director, he firmly believed in Brooks' vision and opposed efforts to lessen the film's impact. He thought that the film's worth stemmed from its readiness to unnerve viewers in the service of a more profound reality. Wilder's backing was resolute but not ostentatious or theatrical. He allegedly advised Brooks to maintain the original tone and message in private discussions and production meetings, even if doing so put the studio at risk of withdrawing support. Wilder knew what was at stake, not only for Flaming Saddles, but also for the humor he found appealing. Sanitizing the movie would have taken away from its main goal, which was to use humor to expose unpleasant realities. Knowing that the shock was a component of the comedy, Wilder supported Brooks when he was under pressure to change scenes with Sheriff Bart's racist epithets or to soften the depiction of the townspeople's stupidity. The film wouldn't have had the same bite without that edge. This subdued opposition to studio meddling was a reflection of Wilder's larger views on the Hollywood establishment. Although he wasn't hostile, he had doubts about executives who put market comfort ahead of creative integrity. Later, Wilder said in interviews that satire was never intended to make people feel safe. Its potency comes from revealing contradictions and hypocrisies, particularly in establishments like politics, entertainment, and police enforcement. For him, Blazing Saddles was more than just a joke, it was a statement. And it's okay if that comment made you uncomfortable. Wilder wasn't trying to avoid offending viewers, he was supporting a mirror, albeit an unpleasant one. One might wonder if Blazing Saddles would have endured in its unadulterated state without Wilder's support. Although Brooks had the idea, Wilder's reputation, especially after the producer's success, gave his defense more weight. He was more than a mere entertainer. He was a well-respected partner who was not afraid to question authority. Wilder's off-screen persona was equally irreverent in a movie that was renowned for defying all conventions of polite comedy. He didn't yell or object, he remained steadfast, and his silent determination contributed to the preservation of one of the most daring comedies in American cinematic history. Wilder battled to preserve the film's most audacious concepts, but what he left on screen subtly changed the way comedy could be powerful without using loud language. Gene contributed to the establishment of this heritage. Blazing Saddles' emotional core was provided by Gene Wilder's portrayal of the Waco Kid, which did more than just amuse viewers. I'm not sure whether you've heard of me before, but my previous name was the Waco Kid. The kid from Waco, in a film characterized by high-volume insanity, ludicrous humor, and irreverence, Wilder's emotionally grounded performance stood out as the unifying force. The movie might have gone too far into caricature and lost its narrative cohesion without his composed presence. The Waco Kid was more than just a joke, he served as the audience's entry point into the narrative, a figure who considered rather than added to the chaos around him. Blazing Saddles became more than just a spoof because to that discipline, it kept it going. Notably, this contribution was out of the ordinary for a comedy movie at the time. In the 1970s, the majority of comedic roles were characterized by verbal abuse or spectacle, loud, expansive performances meant to elicit immediate laughter. The opposite was true of Wilder's work. He was subtle, inwardly oriented, and emotionally nuanced. The film had balance because of that nuance. The sarcasm was able to land with weight because to his scenes, especially the introspective ones. In contrast, the Waco Kid's dry voice and haunted eyes made the jokes funnier, while also implying that there was something genuine going on underneath the satire. The film's longevity was attributed to this layering. Wilder's contribution has gained more recognition over time. Audiences initially remembered the bolder performances and punchlines, but Wilder's understated work held up the best. His act is now regarded as a standard for comedy restraint, and a lesson that sometimes little really is more. Blazing Saddles was chosen for preservation in the National Film Registry, in part because of that influence. Popularity isn't the only reason why the Library of Congress honors movies. Those that hold cultural, historical, or artistic value are preserved. The picture met all three requirements thanks to Wilder's performance. The entire show was elevated from provocative humor to cultural critique by his presence. What legacy then did Gene Wilder contribute to? Not only that of Blazing Saddles but of a specific type of comedy that makes space for stillness, melancholy, and intelligence. Wilder demonstrated that one may be innovative without being brazen and humorous without being boisterous. His performance in Blazing Saddles is still regarded as a masterwork of restraint and a seminal illustration of how great comedy frequently goes unnoticed. The movie is still relevant decades later. Its most subtly subversive voice continues to be Wilder's Waco Kid. Please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment if this opened your eyes to a different perspective on Blazing Saddles. We would like to know what you haven't noticed yet. To ensure you never miss what comes next, subscribe for more behind-the-scenes insights and hit the bell. Click the video on your screen right now if you're ready for more. Have faith in us. You should